Welcome to Shelby Podcast, a production of Shelby Systems Media. And now here's your host, Don Alsop.
We are wrapping up the International Shelby Conference 2010 at the beautiful Omni Hotel in downtown Atlanta. And today, before we go, we wanted to talk to one of our best friends, Steve Hewitt, the editor-in-chief of Christian Computing Magazine. He's been teaching classes all the last 2 or 3 days here at the conference. Steve, welcome back. Thanks for joining us in Atlanta. What classes have you been teaching this year?
Well, first of all, it's always my pleasure and privilege to be with Shelby. 3 different classes. One is a brand new one I've never taught before, but I thought it would be interesting, and it was, on implementing new technology in your church without making everybody upset. So sort of how to maybe move to an electronic newsletter or begin to use texting and do something different other than the way we used to always do it before, and implement that without really getting everybody riled. And then, of course, the what's hot and what's not. I'm sort of famous for that whenever I go. And then in just a little bit, I'll be teaching a conference on mobile computing.
Steve, I believe it was Rick Warren that said every time there's an advancement in technology, the kingdom advances. Tell us a little bit about that What's Hot class. What's the big thing that's coming up in technology?
Well, of course, everything with smartphones, which is my next class on mobile technology. I mean, the new iPhone's out, and the Droid phones are doing very well. There's just a lot of neat stuff that's related to that, like HP's got new E-enabled printers that work with smartphones, so you can actually email documents directly to a printer, from your smartphone to your printer. So much of it has to do with new communications with texting. Everything centered around the smartphone is really the new stuff.
You told me that the second largest search engine now, it was something that surprised me. What was that?
The second largest, second access search engine on the internet is YouTube. And while many churches are thinking, well, if you search for us on Google or Bing or any of the other search engines, you're going to find us, the number 2 search engine is YouTube. And many churches haven't thought about the fact that they need to put a video up on YouTube explaining who their church is, what they believe. Everything's on YouTube if you would search for it. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. So we need to be sure that all ministries, Christian businesses, churches are on YouTube. It's an important place to be.
You went on a little rant during the class. If you could kind of condense that a bit and tell us what you told us.
One of the biggest things I'm really ranting about these days is data mining programs. If someone puts a false report on your credit bureau, we have laws to protect us. You get a free credit bureau once a year to check on that. You can protest it, and by law they have 30 days to change it. But data mining is now becoming more important to banks deciding if they're going to give you a loan, or apartment managers if they're going to rent you an apartment. And that information we have no control of. There's 40 to 60 different companies. A lot of the information they're gathering is inaccurate, and you have to pay money to find out what it is. And even if you find there's a mistake, a major mistake, they say you're a felony in Texas, you've never even been to Texas, you have no legal rights to get it changed. It's impacting us a lot. So we need Congress to actually pass some new laws to protect us in this area. Our technology is hurting us in this area.
Meanwhile, is there any way you can protect yourself at this time?
There's several sites out there that are actually beginning to start a company based upon this service. One's myreputation.com. You got to pay them $99 to find out how bad your reputation's been hurt, and then you can pay them a monthly fee. Free stuff, of course, is like Google Alerts. That's something you can do. You can actually get TweetDeck and find out if your name or your church or your ministry is coming up in Twitter. And so there's some things you can do. You need to monitor yourself, your company, your church, your ministry, your pastor, because you need to nip stuff in the bud if there's bad information going out there.
And one thing you also talked about was the generation gap. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, according to Pew Research, we have the greatest generation gap in America since 1969. And that's sort of amazing. 1969, it was communications, because young people, the hippies, and everybody adopted new terms for things, and older people didn't understand it. That's not the problem now. We're pretty hip on, or cool or whatever, on understanding new terms. The problem now is those of us that are 50 and over are not using the same communication tools that those that are 40 and under. Not children, but 40 and under. They're using texting, instant message. They're using social networking like Facebook. They're video texting right from their cell phone to a site that disseminates that to all their friends. And the church is still trying to, communicate, and older people are still trying to communicate like send me an email. A lot of people under 40 don't even have email and don't use email unless they have to communicate to somebody over 50.
Wow, I saw where Apple sold 8.8 million iPhones in the first quarter of the year, which is a record for a non-holiday quarter. Yep. And also I read where 1 in 2 Americans will own a smartphone by Christmas of 2011. So the sales of smartphones are just going through the roof. Who do you think is going to win the smartphone wars, and why?
It's still really hard to tell. There's obviously 2 big players, the Apple iPhone and then the Android phones. I honestly believe in the long run the Android's going to win unless iPhone changes their business plan. Basically, right now, iPhone continues to have a very powerful, very cool phone, but they've locked it up to AT&T, where the Android, the Google is backing that, is available with AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, Verizon, and so people aren't having to go to one wireless carrier. They have their choice. And the Android phone gives you all sorts of different types of phone, very powerful, very inexpensive, and some of the phones are actually even more powerful than the iPhone. Has a better camera, better resolution, higher speed. I really think the Droid's going to win in the long run, but the iPhone is still very popular, very trendy, and it's certainly set the standard for us.
Last year we talked about cloud computing and how that's coming on. Can you give us an update on that?
You know, cloud computing is evolving. Originally the idea was that all cloud computing would be up on some huge server and everything was going to be owned by the big guys. Cloud computing now is actually being developed so that you host your own stuff. Just like Shelby has Arena and stuff, you can actually host that yourself. You're still accessing it over the Internet, not through the older traditional historical network means. So that's sort of becoming the definition for cloud computing now. Less and less programs you actually install on a computer. That will be server-based, but you'll access it through the Internet. That's sort of becoming the definition for cloud.
Webinars are becoming really popular now. Shelby uses them. I know you use them also. Is that a way that businesses, companies are going to be communicating with their customers in the future, you think?
I think so. Webinar is a great way to do a presentation. It's different from GoToMeeting because you can actually do a presentation. You can invite thousands of people at one time to attend the webinar. You can restrict their ability to make comments. They can just listen. They can certainly text questions. And you can do all sorts of stuff. You can poll people. You can present quizzes. You can do all kinds of stuff with a webinar. It is an excellent thing. Churches need to start recognizing in their discipleship programs a webinar would be a great way to start accessing classes and discipleship courses without having to come to the building.
And didn't you write a book recently?
Yes, I did. Peace in Ministry. Thomas Nelson asked me to write the book, and it's published. And it's on most, I think it's in most Christian bookstores. I think it's on Amazon.com, and I think we sell it from our site. And it basically is an evangelistic book trying to, not evangelistic like salvation, but trying to really convince people that technology in the church and how to use it is important. And it just sort of helps provide a baseline of a lot of the stuff I teach when I teach classes.
How many years have you been coming to IC?
You know, it's been at least 15, 16, 17. It's been so long I can't remember. I remember we used to meet every year just in Memphis, and it's been a long time. And it's a privilege to be invited back year after year.
Well, thank you for helping us wrap up the International Shelby Conference 2010 in Atlanta this year. This is our 20th anniversary, and we really look forward to seeing you in San Antonio next year.
I look forward to it as well. Thank you, and God bless.
You've been listening to Shelby Podcast with your host, Don Alsop. Shelby Podcast is a copyrighted production of Shelby Systems Media and can be heard online at shelbyinc.com/podcast, or you can download the program, copy it to your iPod or MP3 player, and listen at your convenience. Shelby Podcast is also available on iTunes. Make sure you click the RSS link so that you get each new show automatically. Thanks for listening, and tune in next time for another Shelby Podcast.